Okay, thank you very much. Well, let me start by first acknowledging some of the trends that impact American higher education and, to some extent, global higher education. We tend to think a lot about access and affordability in the United States. We tend to worry about the declining levels of state funding. We tend to worry about the opportunities as well as the threats that technology brings to education. We really worry about support for basic research that has declined very significantly over the last decade or so. And not so much talked about, we tend to worry as well about producing enough talent to fill jobs in the United States that require post-secondary education, because currently we're not at a rate that would provide enough of those students. But I want to focus on a different thing, a different trend that is becoming, at least in my view, more preeminent, and then I'm going to give you an example to get a little bit of a better feel of what I mean by that, by not being quite as abstract. What I want to talk about is vertical integration. And as universities, we're both open and insular. We're open in our minds, but actually it turns out we're quite insular in the way we do things. We're open in the students that we enroll, in the faculty that we hire, in the collaborations that we have, but we're quite insular in how we develop, package, and deliver academic programs. We generally operate as vertically integrated businesses. If we want to start a program, we hire the people that need to do that, and we put the program together, mostly from within our universities and not so much in collaboration. And that has had some critical advantages, most significant of which, at least for our institution, I'm sure for many others, is the control of what we call the brand, the control of the quality. But it does have some limitations, and one of the limitations is the quality of the programs is probably limited by the quality of the people one can hire, the quality of the faculty. And second, and quite significant, the speed by which we can assemble new programs. So how do we need to evolve? Well, I think we need to look for analogies in industry. In industry, you'll often hear talking about the supply chain, relationships that basically are substantial, institutionalized, deliberate, contractual, and visionary. And we need to start thinking as universities about what are truly distinct advantages around which we can build excellence, and what are core competencies from which we can assemble them through special partnerships that we may develop through a concept of supply chain. I'll just give for a minute the example about Georgetown, because it will come out later on in an example I'm going to give. For us, a distinct advantages that we're in Washington, D.C., and a primary product is populating the state, the defense departments, and the White House. We have 30,000 students in the federal government in Washington, D.C., so that makes us rather distinct. Our location and the type of people, the type of students who graduate give us some uniqueness. So we need to start thinking as universities about what is something that makes us truly distinct. How do we break new programs that we may think about down? We need to start thinking like systems engineers. We need to be able to scan the horizon for innovations or entities of excellence that we can begin to embed into our programs. And we need to think about business models, both contractual and creative, from which we can extract value and we can provide value. In fact, both extracting and providing value turn out to be critical if you have to develop a sustainable supply chain model. So let me go into an example and be a little bit more concrete, because I know the rest has been quite abstract. Some of you may have heard about Education City in Qatar, in Doha. In 2004, the state of Qatar, through Qatar Foundation, approached Georgetown University and asked us if we wanted to establish a campus in Qatar. Actually, they didn't want everything that we had to offer. They only wanted one thing. They wanted a campus that could do international relations and government. They believed that, and I think it is true, we are one of the top-ranked institutions in this particular area, and they wanted that part and that part alone as part of the portfolio. Now, for Georgetown, there was a distinct advantage in doing that. We do, in fact, excel in international relations, and being in Washington, D.C. is a superb place to do that. But being in the Middle East, you can do certain things that you cannot do from Washington. And Middle East, as we all know, is an important place in the world, particularly in the context of international relations. So for us, being in Doha allowed us to do certain things that we couldn't do just as well in Washington. And for Qatar, having Georgetown in Doha allowed it to have a quality for a program that otherwise they wouldn't have. It was a visionary idea, not because they wanted to attract Georgetown to Qatar, but really they attracted another 8 universities. They went to Carnegie Mellon for computer science. They went to Texas A&M for petroleum engineering. They went to Cornell for medicine, and another 4 or 5 others. I don't need to go through all of them. But the vision was actually very interesting. They wanted to assemble an Ivy League quality university much faster than they could do in any other way. Now, just a thing about Qatar, 200,000 people. There's virtually no intellectual capital in Qatar. There's plenty of sun, and there was no infrastructure. So the vision was to create an Ivy League quality university much faster than others could be. So it is now 2018. Georgetown is in the second decade of this experiment. By 2010, Qatar had assembled actually all 10 universities. And in this decade, they're basically focusing not anymore on assembling universities that effectively provided the departments, but really integrate them into a coherent program. So in conclusion, I wanted to share just 2 thoughts. Number one, I'll share with you an example of where we were part of a supply chain model. I could have shared with you examples where we actually had other partners to do supply chain that allowed us to put together programs much faster and at a much, much lower cost than we could have done on our own. So that what happened in Qatar was in 2000, 2010. It was a decade of what I call globalization for at least American universities. I think the rest of the Anglo-Saxon world it was very similar. And, but I do want to share one thought, that Georgetown started in Qatar in 2004. In 2003, however, I personally, with my colleagues, came to Greece twice to see whether we could do a high-quality university in Greece. Unfortunately, the environment was not conducive to that and has remained rather hostile since then. So the rest is history, and we ended up in Qatar. Thank you.